5 enemy fighters, 1 rookie pilot, altitude 700 feet, speed 212 miles. The P-40 is mid-turn when the controls lock, nose drops, the aircraft rolls left, time to impact 7 seconds. 18-year-old cadet Frank Malloy was on his first real combat patrol. No kills, no formation. His wingman was already out of position. The radio buzzed with partial chatter, then silence. Enemy aircraft 5, BF-109s. Coordinated, 1 pair pushes low, 1 climbs, 1 shadows. Malloy tries to pull a flat brake turn, but his airspeed bleeds off too quickly. The stick seizes, his wing stalls, the P-40 starts to spin. It's over, or it should be, but the stall doesn't kill him, it saves him. In the slipstream of failure, the aircraft yaw-rolls off axis just enough to throw off the enemy's lead. 1 overshoots. 2 adjusts too late. Malloy doesn't just recover, he pivots, and over the next 14 seconds, he'll outturn every single one of them using a maneuver that isn't in any Allied manual. April 1943. Tunisia. First contact. And the first move he made was the one the instructors called a career-ending mistake. Frank Malloy wasn't supposed to fly combat, not yet. He had just turned 18 3 weeks before shipping out. Barely passed the accelerated cadet program with 92 flight hours, most of them in trainers. He'd logged just 7 hours in the P-40 before being deployed to Tunisia in April 1943 as an emergency reinforcement. No combat time, no gunnery rating. The squadron had lost 3 pilots in a week. They needed warm bodies. Malloy arrived with clean boots, no kill markings, and the wide-eyed look of someone who's still overcorrected on landing flaps. He made a mistake his first day, rolled right on takeoff, and clipped a runway marker with his gear strut. The aircraft bounced. He recovered. The crew chief wasn't impressed. By day 2, he was a joke. They called him Blackout, because during a training sortie, Malloy had attempted a high-speed left brake at 216 mph, pulled too hard 4.6 Gs, and blacked out for nearly 3 seconds. The instructor had to call off the mock intercept. The debrief was cold. "You don't muscle the P-40," the captain barked. "It's not a knife fighter. You turn too hard, you'll kill the lift, stall the wing, or kill yourself, especially under 240 mph. This isn't a Zero. This isn't a Spitfire. It's a tank with wings." Someone else had it. "Next time you want a nap, try a hammock, not the left stick." His flight status was downgraded to restricted. No lead rolls, no offensive formation, cleared for patrol escort only, with direct flight plan, no deviation allowed. But Malloy didn't forget the blackout. He remembered the feel just before the tunnel vision, the way the plane had dipped, bucked, then caught its own slipstream. He thought about it constantly. What if he hadn't tried to muscle the plane? What if he had let it slip? Just a little, but he wasn't allowed to test anything. Not in combat. On the morning of April 17th, orders came down for a short-range escort over a forward logistics point near El Guitar. 3 aircraft in a wide echelon. Altitude block 8,000 to 10,000 feet. Enemy contact unlikely. Malloy was tail-end Charlie. His job was to follow, not lead, not fight, until 13 minutes into the patrol, when his flight lead broke radio contact and 5 enemy fighters appeared out of sun angle. No formation, no backup, no instructions, just instinct. And the last piece of advice still ringing in his head: avoid lateral turns under 240. Don't muscle the P-40. Do not enter a horizontal brake. At 212 mph, he did exactly that, and everything they warned him about happened at once. The Curtiss P-40 Warhawk was a survivor, not a performer. It wasn't loved, it wasn't feared, but it got the job done when flown right. The U.S. Army Air Forces issued it not because it was the best, but because it was available, mass-produced, rugged, easy to maintain in sand and heat. The P-40E variant Malloy flew had a 150 HP Allison engine, Max speed 362 mph at 15,000 feet. It climbed at 2,100 feet per minute on a good day, rolled at 75 miles per second at 250 mph, and had a clean stall speed of 108 mph. 650 caliber M2 Brownings gave it punch, 235 rounds per gun. When it hit, it shredded, but when it turned, it punished. The Warhawk could not sustain energy in a flat circle fight. Above 10,000 feet, it bled speed too fast. Roll rate slowed sharply under 200 mph. Trim adjustment was slow, and under 240 mph. The stick became leaden in lateral turns. Yaw misalignment over 4 degrees could send the nose skidding. Instructors called the danger zone the dead band between 200 and 230 mph, where torque overtook lift and roll dampened. That's where most accidents happen, especially if you tried to fight like you were flying a Zero or Spitfire. The doctrine said, don't turn. Don't bleed speed. Use vertical dives, boom and zoom attacks, high-speed passes. Avoid prolonged engagement. If you're bracketed, extend. If forced into a turn, make it one, then dive out. But buried inside the P-40's weaknesses was a quirk. The Warhawk had an unusually strong tailplane and a reinforced rear fuselage. If yawed hard enough into a stall entry at medium speed, the aircraft wouldn't spin immediately. It would roll off axis, yaw out of plane, then self-correct sometimes violently. It wasn't safe, it wasn't predictable, and it wasn't taught. Because 99% of the time, it didn't help you. It just threw you off vector. But Malloy remembered the blackout. The moment before he lost vision, the Warhawk had skidded laterally hard, left yaw, then dropped into a slight bank. Not a stall. The nose dipped. The G-load vanished. And for a flash, he had seen the sky twist sideways before the instructor pulled him out. What if that wasn't failure? What if that was a door? The aircraft's dead band, normally a trap, might be a window. Not to turn better, but to turn weirder, to force overshoots, to bait pursuit into geometry it couldn't follow. But you'd have to fly it wrong on purpose. You'd have to enter the dead band willingly, flirt with stall speed, and let the Warhawk's mass roll you through. That would mean violating every directive in the book. And when 5 BF-109s came down on Malloy's 6 at 9,200 feet, he didn't think of the doctrine. He thought about that blackout. The first glint came at 10 o'clock high. Malloy spotted it late sun flash off a canopy at an odd angle. Seconds later, more 5 BF-109s descending in a steep echelon left angle of approach 27 degrees, closing fast. Malloy checked altitude 9,200 feet, airspeed 237 mph. He looked right. No wingman, no lead, just empty sky. Radio static, then silence. He was alone. The German element was well structured. 2 fighters high, 2 low, 1 trailing center. Classic compression net. They weren't diving for a kill. They were hurting him. Distance, 800 yards and closing. Malloy throttled up engine, answered with a growl, but airspeed only climbed to 248 mph. Not enough to run. Not enough to climb. His aircraft had fuel for a 40-minute sortie, but no time for tactics. The 2 low fighters surged forward, peeling out to bracket. The high pair widened, circling into flanking altitude 10,400 feet. Building vertical offset, the 5th stayed above the center, holding in reserve at 9,800 feet. He was about to be boxed. The first pass came from the left low fighter. He closed hard 280 mph. Angle tight. Malloy pulled right. Not a full break, just an offset. The BF-109 passed shallow, overshooting by 120 yards. Now the second attacker adjusted, high, from the right. Malloy stayed flat. Waiting. No shot taken, just pressure. They weren't here to shoot yet. They were here to force a mistake. Distance collapsed from 800 to 300 yards in 11 seconds. Malloy was inside their bracket now. They turned not toward him, but toward where he would be in 5 seconds. It was a timing box. They'd seen Americans turn flat and bleed energy. They'd punished the mistake. Malloy knew he couldn't climb out, knew he couldn't dive terrain below was rising. Scattered ridge work. No clean fall space. Altimeter read 9,000 feet, then 8,920. Slight drop. He rolled into a shallow left, then snapped into a full horizontal brake. The same move he'd blacked out from in training. Airspeed 212 mop. Stick pressure loaded. G-force spiked. Vision tunneled. The Germans committed. 2 dove in tandem, 1 held above, 2 tracked from mid-range. He was in the center of a 5-point vise. His nose was now 70D off his original heading, altitude down to 8,700 feet. And then the P-40 locked up. Stick froze. Left aileron didn't respond. Nose dropped 6 degrees. Stall warning blinked red. 1 second later, everything failed at once. And that's when the maneuver began. The Warhawk shuddered. Malloy pulled harder. Nothing. The left wing trembled, then dropped. A stall. The nose dipped. The stick went slack. And airspeed plunged to 107 maup. He felt the tail twitch. Rudder input died. The whole aircraft slid sideways in the sky, yawing, not spinning. The nose was now 20 degrees down. Roll angle tilting past 45 degrees. G-force fading fast. Altitude 8, 200 feet, and falling. Malloy had lost the turn. This was the moment every instructor warned about. A lateral stall in a P-40 under 230 muppig was a death sentence. Flat spin likely. Recovery altitude unlikely. The horizon tilted, his vision blurred. But instead of tumbling into a spiral, the Warhawk twisted sideways. It didn't spin. It flipped. A rightward yaw took hold as the left wing dipped further. The nose slipped out of plane. The aircraft rotated 118-miler from its original heading in just over 1.4 seconds. The Germans, seeing the break, committed. 2 BF-109s dove to intercept. 1 lined up for deflection fire at 250 yards, expecting a steady arc, but the stall made Malloy vanish from their solution. The P-40's twisted fall moved it out of their aim cone by 30 feet, enough to ruin both firing angles. The lead 109 fired, missed high. The second pilot adjusted too late, his tracers slicing empty air beneath Malloy's wing root. Malloy fought to recover. Airspeed still low, 188.8 map. He kicked right rudder instinctively. It worked. Nose leveled slightly. Elevator responded. The aircraft rolled out nearly flat heading, now reversed. 2 BF-109s flashed past, overshooting wide. He didn't even touch the trigger, just breathed. 1 German banked into a climbing loop to reacquire energy blown. The second tried a shallow turn back, but had no closure speed. Malloy punched throttle to 85% or nudged the nose 3 degrees down and let the airspeed build 192, 203, 211 Malagapuk. The Warhawk steadied, but now 2 new attackers were inbound, 1 high, 1 level. Malloy pulled left, not to run, to test it again. Same speed, same entry, same mistake, but this time on purpose. He dropped nose into a shallow left, rolled 40 dig, let the airspeed bleed to 208 milachst, kicked right rudder mid-turn. The Warhawk shuddered again, rolled off axis. This time, he was ready. The aircraft twisted in a yaw flip nose, swinging wide as the tail slid, just enough to dump angle. The BF-109 above him committed to a high pass, dropped in, lined up, fired, and missed again. A second overshoot, second escape, second accident, or something else. Malloy banked out low, climbing slowly to 8,000 feet. The Germans regrouped. 1 by 1, they broke off their pursuit vectors and began circling. They weren't confused now. They were recalibrating. Because the strange stall that saved Malloy once they'd just seen it twice. And now? They started aiming not where he was, but where they thought he would be. The third attack didn't come straight. The BF-109s had learned, instead of diving directly into Malloy's 6, they broke from the side, 11 o'clock low, one pulling wide, the other closing shallow. From his cockpit at 8,000 feet, Malloy watched them split, one coming fast at 290 millimeters, the other holding a tighter angle, rising gently into a predictive climb. They weren't chasing the turn anymore. They were cutting through it. His earlier trick, stall yawing the P-40 into off-axis recovery, had bought him time, but now it was turning into a trap. The Germans had adjusted their angles. They weren't aiming for his current heading. They were slicing into the arc, predicting where he'd yaw out and arrive 2 seconds later. Malloy rolled right, tried to climb airspeed 226 MAF, too low for escape, too high for tight maneuver. He checked his 6. No help. Still alone. Fuel just over 50%, no damage, but heavy engine heat building. Oil temp creeping past 238 degrees. He pitched left again, faked the stall entry. The Germans didn't follow. Instead, the low fighter tightened into a scissors move, pre-positioning into his turn exit vector. The second climbed to high 8, holding altitude, watching, waiting for him to commit to the roll. Malloy's heart rate spiked. His trick had become a tell. The lead BF-109 fired early from 450 yards, not to hit but to herd. Tracers flashed wide, but forced Malloy into a shallower bank. His nose drifted up. Airspeed dropped to 214 mph. One click from dead zone again. This time, the Warhawk didn't twist clean. The nose staggered, stuck briefly. Ailerons felt muddy. Malloy hesitated. He didn't want to spin. He tried to adjust with right rudder, but now the rudder lagged. He was climbing flat, losing speed. The second German dove in fast from his 8 o'clock, closing the scissors, trying to finish the net. Malloy yanked left, hard, too hard. The Warhawk's nose kicked out again, but this time too late, too shallow. Instead of spinning past the intercept, it froze, drifting 60 feet across the line of fire. The second BF-109 fired a short burst, 0.7 seconds, and tracers licked the top of Malloy's right wing. One hit, no visible damage, but they had him pinned now. They weren't following. They were predicting, anticipating the recovery window, cutting through the overshoot. His unpredictable move had become predictable. He dove. The P-40 dropped hard 7 agroom, nose down, throttle wide open, airspeed building past 260 mph, altitude falling fast, 7,100, 6,800, 6,300 feet. Still, they followed, one high, one behind, one swinging left for cutoff. He had no more energy tricks, no altitude to buy recovery space, and no way to run. The move that saved him once, then twice, had just been mapped, and at 600 feet, with the deck rushing up and 2 fighters on his tail, he made the only choice left. He tried to break the stall again, but this time, it failed. Malloy kicked the rudder too early. At 600 feet, airspeed 290 mph. He rolled left into a shallow break, then input full right rudder, hoping to trigger the same lateral yaw flip that had saved him twice. But the numbers weren't right. The aircraft was heavier now. Nose too high. G-load light. The stall came hard. The Warhawk's left wing dipped. Rudder stopped responding. Right aileron stuck mid-deflection. The plane didn't twist. It yawed, then froze, and then the bottom dropped out. The aircraft skidded into a yaw spin nose 23 degrees down, tail wobbling. He was no longer flying. He was falling. Altitude 6,100, 5,800, 5,400 feet. Airspeed dropped to 180 meters, then climbed rapidly to a 14. 232 as gravity took over. Malloy wrestled the stick. Felt no response. He had 6.2 seconds before hitting the deck. Not a spin, he muttered. Not yet. But the P-40 thought otherwise. The left wing buffeted violently. Elevator response vanished. Rudder slammed against foot pressure. G-forces dropped to near zero. He was in it, an unrecoverable flat yaw spin, something even the instructors hadn't been able to simulate safely. The kind of entry that never had an exit. Malloy tried the classic fix neutralize stick. Throttle idle, full opposite rudder. Nothing. He was down to 4,500 feet, rolling left, nose dipping, horizon flipping end over end. Then instinct struck. In training, during his blackout, he remembered the moment just before passing out the nose had dropped, but he hadn't centered the stick. He'd pulled opposite aileron and rudder, and something snapped the aircraft level. He punched it. Right aileron, left rudder against recovery protocol. Throttle still at 30% airspeed. 241 WWII. Altitude 4,100 feet. The Warhawk bucked. Once. Then again. A violent jolt surged through the fuselage. The nose kicked 9 degrees right. Then the spin. Broke. The aircraft snapped into a wide, ugly roll, half inverted. The stick responded. Elevator came back online. He slammed throttle forward, 100% leveled the wings. Altitude now 3,800 feet. He had dropped 300 feet in 6.5 seconds. Breathing hard, he checked the horizon, 2 BF-109s high and behind, climbing to reacquire. Trying to understand what just happened. He had no answer for them, because what saved him wasn't a maneuver. It was a mistake that countered a mistake. He discovered a hidden recovery vector, a torque-yaw stall escape that no one had ever mentioned in training. And now he was low. Too low to try it again, but high enough to use it. One last time. One German was peeling down, approaching fast from behind. 800 yards. Shallow dive. Malloy was out of standard tricks. But now he had something else. Not a dogfight turn, not a textbook recovery, but a maneuver that started with failure and ended with confusion. He pulled the nose up 5 degrees, held at 218 mean, get him popped, waited. This time, it wasn't accidental, it was deliberate, and he was going to show them what a P-40 could really do when it was flown on the edge of collapse. What Malloy had just executed had no name. Not in any manual, not in any training syllabus, but it exploited a flaw the P-40 had carried since its first prototype flight, a tendency to slip sideways under yaw at medium speed, especially when rudder and aileron inputs conflicted near the stall line. Normally, this was dangerous. Dangerous because it robbed lift, induced asymmetry in the wing flow, and caused unpredictable roll effects. But in the hands of someone reckless or desperate, it could become something else. Malloy began testing at mid-fight. He knew the sweet spot lay between 200 and 215 MELP. Above that, the P-40 remained too stable. Below that, it dropped into unrecoverable mush. At 208 MELP, however, if he pitched the nose just 4 degrees up, and input opposing rudder and aileron at the same time, right rudder with left stick, the aircraft would snap. Not into a spin, but into a violent pitch yaw-roll, rotating 120-degree off-axis in just under 1.1 seconds. It wasn't clean, it wasn't controllable, but it created a moment of confusion, a blind zone behind the Mustang, where any attacker tracking on a predictive line would fly straight past his guns. He had accidentally found a snap-stall turn, not a pure hammerhead, not a flat scissor. A unique torque-assisted twist that used the P-40's aerodynamic resistance and mass to roll the nose wide just as it reached the edge of stall, but not past it. From the outside, it looked like a mistake. From the inside, it was chaos. But the result was real. The pursuing aircraft lost the angle, overshot, or had to break away to avoid collision. The danger. The window of execution was less than 1 second. Throttle had to be at 60-80%. Nose pitch angle could not exceed 6 degrees. Airspeed had to sit between 204 and 211 miles. And if rudder and aileron weren't released at the right moment, the plane would snap into an unrecoverable yaw spin. Worst of all, it couldn't be done twice in a row at the same altitude. The bleed from the first maneuver Cost between 400 and 700 feet, depending on entry. Malloy had discovered this the hard way. He was now at 3,800 feet. And dropping. He tested it again, climbed to 4,100 feet, baited a shallow dive, then snapped left rudder, right stick, same roll, same yaw, nose flipping 112 degrees, coming out low and behind a BF-109. He didn't fire, he just watched. It worked. But it wasn't flight, it was almost a crash, and that's why no one had found it. Now, the P-40 was known for its durability, not its grace. No pilot wanted to risk a stall mid-fight. But Malloy Young, inexperienced, and just untrained enough, had stumbled into the narrowest window of advantage in the entire envelope. Now, it was time to use it on purpose, against trained attackers, in full view, under pressure, with only a few hundred feet of sky left. Because the next attacker had locked him up from 600 yards, diving in at full throttle. Malloy rolled left just slightly. Airspeed 213 mph, pitch 5 degrees, right rudder, left stick, hold. He was about to roll the dice again 1 second from a win, or from flaming out at 3,200 feet. Malloy's hands were steady. Airspeed 213 mph, altitude 3,200 feet, engine RPM holding at 2,650. He trimmed nose up 2 degrees. Throttle at 72%. The BF-109 behind him was descending fast from 600 yards. Dive angle 12 degrees. Nose steady. Energy building. Closure rate over 80 mph. Malloy had 5 seconds before gun range. This would be the cleanest test. The trick wasn't the stall, it was timing. He counted out loud. 3. Right rudder began to pressure. 2. Left stick eased in. 1. Throttle held, nose up, now. The Warhawk snapped. Rudder and aileron conflicted for a split second. The left wing stalled partially. The aircraft yawed violently, 11 degrees right while rolling 38 degrees left. The nose flicked wide. Malloy released a rudder and stick on the mark. The P-40 spun sideways momentarily, belly first to the attacker. In that 1.4-second blind zone, the BF-109's tracking solution collapsed. Overshoot. The German fighter shot past Malloy's canopy by 80 feet, pulled hard vertical to escape. Malloy rolled level, throttle wide, and reversed rudder. This time, he had angle. He squeezed the trigger, 0.6-second burst. All 6 Brownings roared. Hits. Tracer fire tore across the 109's left fuselage and wing root. Control surface shattered. The German pulled vertical again, but stalled out. Smoke streamed. No parachute. Confirmed kill. Malloy didn't celebrate. Second threat inbound, this one smarter. Coming in level, not diving. Range 700 yards. Angle shallow. Speed matched at 215 mph. This one wasn't overshooting. He was trying to flush Malloy into a failed break. Malloy didn't flinch. He reversed course, banked left, then immediately began a rolling climb. Not steep, just enough to bait. Airspeed dropped to 208 mph. He held the nose at 5 degrees pitch. The German adjusted, maintained chase. Now came the twist. Malloy chopped throttle to 62%, kicked opposite rudder again, this time left rudder, right stick. And the Warhawk lurched. Slight stall onset. Aileron resistance spiked. Malloy counted 3, 2, 1, release. The aircraft flicked right across its own roll. Yaw slip offset 7 degrees. Altitude loss 480 feet. The German tried to match, but mistimed it. He pulled vertical too soon. Drifted left. Malloy had the inside, throttle full, nose down 6 degrees, airspeed recovering to 225 mop. He closed, 300 yards, 250, 210. Fired, 1 second burst. Tracers tore through canopy and nose. The BF-109 rolled inverted and dropped trailing smoke. Then fire, second kill. But Malloy couldn't climb. His engine heat was spiking, 252 degree mockets. Oil pressure, 74 psi. Cooling marginal. Third enemy inbound, 9 o'clock low. Fast climb, No time for another yaw-roll. Malloy turned right, shallow bank, no trick, just speed. Airspeed 230 Messerschmitt, altitude now 2,600 feet. The German broke off, not from fear, but from fuel. The fighting had gone on 6 minutes, and they'd burned energy chasing a P-40 that shouldn't have survived the first pass. Malloy steadied, checked his 6. Empty sky. His breathing was hard, arms locked, engine still ticking. Fuel down to 38%. One flap not responding, the right one. But he was alive. 3 Germans gone, 2 driven off, and no one could explain the turn he'd used because it wasn't a turn. It was a collapse, a controlled drop, a moment of chaos shaped into advantage. He started toward base, unsure if the aircraft would make it. But first he had to survive one more thing: landing it. Malloy pointed the nose west toward the forward strip at El Guetar. Estimated distance 42 miles. Fuel gauge showed 38%. But with throttle management and altitude drift, he might stretch it? Maybe. Altitude 600 feet, dropping slowly as he eased power back to 65%. Engine heat still climbing 256 degrees, right at the edge of redline. Oil pressure 72 psi. He toggled cooling flaps. The left one responded. The right didn't. Something had warped during the twist maneuver. He could feel it. The controls were sluggish left of center, and the right flap half deployed and stuck. It would drag the entire descent. He couldn't climb. Not with the thermal pressure building and asymmetric drag. That ruled out a straight run. If he hit another fighter patrol, he'd never escape. He checked ammo. Of the original 235 rounds per gun, his remaining count was roughly 120 per gun. Enough for one more burst, maybe 2. But no German fighters appeared. What did appear at 2 o'clock low was the thin, broken line of a desert landing strip. PSP matting over dirt, narrow, uneven. Wind from the east, 11 knots. Quartering tail. He dropped to 1,400 feet, then 1,000. Gear lever down, left gear locked, right gear slow. Warning light flickered for 4 seconds, then steadied. Green. He toggled flaps, only the left one dropped fully. Right flap stuck at 40%. Now that would yank the aircraft hard left on final. He trimmed right to compensate. Nose down to 5 degrees. Throttle reduced to 45%. Airspeed 165 millipoop. Final approach at 400 feet. Turbulence rocked the P-40. Tail yawed slightly. He corrected. Airspeed down to 128 mph. Too high. He cut throttle completely. Glide angle steepened. Now 112 mph. Barely above stall. At 100 feet. Crosswind pushed from the right. Nose yawed. He input left rudder and held tight. Touchdown 104, Miss Free up. Slightly nose high. The Warhawk hit hard. Left gear caught first, pulling the aircraft 6 feet left. Right gear slammed down. The asymmetric flaps dragged his nose sideways. He braked unevenly, left brake mushy, right brake hot. The aircraft yawed. He corrected. Full rudder, stick back, brakes pulsing, rollout distance 200 feet. He stopped with 280 feet of matting left. Engine still running, barely. Canopy jammed on first pull, popped on second. He climbed out as ground crew ran in. One looked under the wing, then whistled. The right flap actuator had been bent 9 degrees off spec. One round had punched through the wing root, explaining the roll lag. An engine coolant was boiling over, but it had made it. Debrief came quick. Guncom footage pulled. 3 kills confirmed, 2 overshoots, 1 energy stall, 1 overshoot unconfirmed, 2 BF-109s fled combat airspace. The tape was reviewed by command. No one could explain the turn. Intentional stall, flat spin escape, sloppy rudder input, no one knew. But the final attack geometry was impossible to deny. 2 109s outturned. 1 out-yawed, 1 overshot and killed, all in under 16 seconds. Malloy had survived. But the P-40 had paid for it. The airframe was overstressed. Cooling systems warped. Control rods bent. Aircraft marked flyable, single-use only. They wouldn't let him take it up again. But word had already spread. A cadet had made the Warhawk twist in midair and walk away from 5-to-1 odds, and now, in 2 other squadrons nearby, pilots were asking, what exactly did that kid do? In the turn, Malloy's P-40 was dragged into the maintenance tent within the hour. The ground crew chief stared at the undercarriage, then ran his hand across the right wing root. The aircraft had been not cracked, not folded, but warped just enough that the right flap couldn't fully deploy. Measured deviation, 0.6 degrees from factory alignment. Enough to destabilize landing, enough to break you on takeoff. They chalked a red stripe on the tail. Airworthy, no further sorties. Malloy was still in his flight suit, sweat-soaked, boots caked with dust, when the intelligence officer brought him the gun camera reel. "Walk me through it," the major said, motioning to the projector. The film clicked on. Black and white, 16mm, fixed nose angle. The first burst, blurry pass, nothing. Second burst, a clean sweep across a BF-109 left wing shattering. Kill one. The third scene was different. The frame spun slightly. The horizon tilted unnaturally, then a flash. A BF-109 streaked across, angle reversed. Malloy's tracers hit from below. "That one," the major said. "How did you get behind him?" Malloy hesitated. "I was stalling," he said. "The rudder kicked out. I think I rolled." The officer frowned. "You rolled?" At stall speed, Malloy nodded. "Yeah." With opposite inputs, Malloy said nothing. The room was quiet for a moment. Then the major spoke again. "We've shown this to 2 other pilots. They say it looks like a snap roll." "It wasn't," Malloy said. "It wasn't clean. It just happened." The major scribbled notes. "You didn't panic. You didn't crash. You got 2 kills in under 20 seconds using an untrained reversal stall." Malloy shook his head. "No. I just reacted." Later that day, the report was filed. The summary read, "Cadet Malloy entered a stall at medium altitude under duress. Aircraft did not spin, but rolled through a yaw break. Recovery appears to be instinctive, not trained. Second use of maneuver resulted in kill. Third use shows signs of intentional control. Recommend further review. Not suitable for general training." They tried to shelve it, but the gun cam footage made its way to a training officer with connections to Fighter Command. The tape was copied once then again. A single print made its way to a classified lecture reel titled Non-Standard Escape Patterns, North Africa. No names. No credit. Just a reel of a P-40 doing something no Warhawk was meant to do. Malloy was reassigned. The P-40 was cannibalized for parts within 72 hours. Engine removed, wing panel stripped, control rod sold off to another squadron, but the footage, it survived. An instructor years later, while showing the reel, remarked, "No way that was by design." Another replied, "Maybe not." But it worked. What couldn't be ignored was that the maneuver only happened because of a violation, a broken rule, a mistake, held just long enough to become something else. They tried to erase it, but they couldn't explain it, and in time, they'd have to name it. By May 1943, the story was unofficial doctrine. No memos, no briefing slides, just whispers. They called it different things: the twist, the slip turn. Malloy's mistake. In 2 squadrons flying P-40s near Kasserine and El Guettar, word passed from one pilot tent to the next how an 18-year-old cadet had dodged 5 Luftwaffe fighters using an accidental reversal stall. Some laughed. Others asked for the footage. Then they tried it, not in combat at first, in morning test flights, over dry flats or empty sky, only when alone, no witnesses. They entered shallow turns at 215 demi-parrier kicked hard rudder opposite stick, and waited for the nose to twist. Most bailed before the stall. A few held it longer. One pilot in the 57th Fighter Group managed a clean recovery at 3,800 feet, reporting the same flick-yaw escape. He said it felt like a pivot on glass. It wasn't taught. But it worked. In the next 60 days, across those two squadrons, 11 pilots confirmed successful breakouts using the snap-stall twist. Of those, 3 recorded kills using the maneuver to force overshoots. More importantly, survivability increased when tracked. Those who attempted the stall turn and escaped reported a 27% higher survival rate in multi-contact engagements below 10,000 feet. But no instructor ever wrote it down, because the numbers were fragile, entry too narrow, margin of error deadly, and the aircraft, P-40s especially, had to be near-perfect trim. If your flap dragged, if you input late, if your airspeed dropped below 204 mph, it wasn't a maneuver. It was a death spiral. Still, pilots practiced quietly. Some drew diagrams in briefing tents. Others chalked yaw angles on the wall beside bunk beds. You could spot the ones trying it. They would stretch out turns wide, then cut throttle abruptly mid-bend, like they were hunting for that stall window. One captain called it snap pivot. Another just shrugged. When the nose goes wide, keep your nerve, ride the slide. Malloy's name wasn't in the reports, but everyone knew where it came from. The green kid with no kills, who lost control mid-turn and survived long enough to show the rest what a stall could do when flown with fear and instinct in balance. It was never authorized, but it spread anyway, because in the skies over Tunisia, P-40 pilots knew the real truth. Manuals were written on the ground. This slip-yaw twist was written in the air, and every time a German fired too early and missed by inches, some pilot flying that same battered airframe would whisper, "Let's try the Malloy." Frank Malloy never flew fighters again. 3 weeks after the El Guetar sortie, his reassignment orders came through Troop Transport Command, Sicily. He flew C-47s for the rest of the war supply drops, medivacs, paratrooper runs. His combat rating was marked as cautious but instinctive, and that was enough to disqualify him from further fighter duty. He logged 88 total combat hours, none of them in a P-40 again. He left the service in 1946, just before turning 22. His aircraft, the Warhawk that had twisted, snapped, and survived, was stripped for parts. Its right flap was melted down for scrap. The fuselage was sold to a training depot in Egypt. Final disposition scrapped in 1947. Malloy never saw it again. But the maneuver lived. Not officially, not in textbooks, but in flight folklore. Fighter instructors in Italy would sometimes tell new cadets, "If your stick seizes and your wing drops, don't panic pivot it like the North Africa boys did. No name, no footage, just myth." In 1944, one P-47 pilot in Anzio used the same rudder-aileron trick in a shallow stall to escape a Me-109. He wrote in his log, "Did the twist." Just like that story from Tunisia. Later, as jets replaced propellers, the trick vanished, outpaced by thrust and computer controls. There was no place for stall-yaw escapes at 600 knots, but in one corner of the old Warbirds circuit. A veteran pilot at an airshow once demonstrated a partial yaw-roll in a restored Warhawk. He called it the pivot. When asked where he learned it, he smiled. From a kid who didn't know what he was doing. Frank Malloy died in 1989, age 64, with no official kills listed. Just 2 transport citations. But in one forgotten combat reel, in one unmarked maneuver, his name survived. Because sometimes, the sky gives you 1 second to invent something no one can explain. And if you survive, you pass it on. Mission brief. If you're ever forced into a flat turn at low speed, and you feel the stall coming, don't fight it, use it, and twist the nose where they never expect it.